All right, everyone. So welcome to the next session. We're done with you know, so we spoke on firewalls and what else did we just covered? So now we'll talk of IDS and IPS. Then we will talk now on DMZ, Demilitarized Zone. I believe again some of us we are pretty much familiar with this word. We're talking of DMZ. It's a physical or logical subnetwork. Remember, we already talked about subnetting? Yes. Or logical subnetwork that separate an organization internal network from external networks, right? Typically the internet. So first, it serves as a buffer zone, providing an additional layer of security for internal network. And again, you guys are going to see, why are we discussing all of this? Why is it even related to PCI DSS? It's going to come handy. What? Right. For example, do you see this is an organization internal network? Or you can see very well. Okay. You have the DMZ, you have the internal network and internal user and all those things. And then with the DMZ, of course, you don't want to put your database in the DMZ. So I don't know what this diagram is saying. Right. So you can have your web server, you can have your mail server, but your internal network has to be protected. That's why you have the database. That's the heart. Okay. And all sensitive information. So, but some of the functionalities that the DMZ, first and foremost, it isolates external facing services such as web server, mail server, DNS server. We're going to discuss all of this shortly from the internet network to reduce the risk of attacks reaching sensitive internal systems. Also, it provides secure exposure in that services that must be accessible to the outside world, such as web or email services, are placed in the DMZ, reducing exposure to the internal network. It also control access in that the DMZ act as a control access point for any connection from the internet to internal services. It only allows specific communication that passes through security filters, right? So this is a typical example. If you look at your DMZ here, you have the internet, you have stuff that must also be separated from your internal network. I'm going to see that shortly. So you have it definitely provide additional layer of security, right? But what are some of the components that we can talk about? Key components. First, remember this picture, we've been talking about web server. Last time we so much mention of web server. I said I was definitely going to come there. And I knew that we have slide for that, So we have web server. First, it exposed to the internet to handle HTTP requests. We're going to discuss it when we go to the web server slides. Mail server used for email communication while preventing direct access to the internal email system, right? You have DNS server, resolve domain names to IP addresses and save public facing DNS queries. We're going to discuss that for sure. Proxy servers act as an intermediaries between external user and internal resources to enhance security. Remember, I think we always spoke of the like proxy firewall. So likewise, the proxy server also serves same purposes, right, or the same purpose. And then for firewall, enforces security rules to control traffic flow between the DMZ internal network as well as the internet. And then we talk of security layer in DMZ. It said external firewall protects DMZ from internet, ensuring only authorized traffic is allowed. Internal firewall protect the internal network from DMZ. We're going to see, so you have firewall before and after, restricting access to sensitive internal resources, right? Again, remember, all of these are just defense in depth, like just additional layer of security. And why DMZ is important, I think we talked of this already, right? Enhance security by isolating the network from the internet. The DMZ have reduced the chances of external attack. Yes, I think was okay. Attack, that will reach the internal resources. We talk of control exposure. For example, only certain services that need to interact with the external users, right? For example, the web application are exposed while internal systems remain hidden and protected. And that's why you have to put that stuff in your DMZ. And then segmentation, the DMZ add an extra layer of segmentation within the network, creating a buffer zone between the public internet as well as the private internal network. While for access control, a well-configured DMZ provides tighter control over which services are accessible from the internet and ensures secure access to internet system, right? But how does it work? For example, we'll talk about traffic flow. So external traffic from the internet is first filtered by the external firewall before even entering the DMZ. That's why we say that we have a firewall, before and after. So internal, you have firewall. DMZ, you have whatever thing that you want to put in your DMZ, web server, email server, all those things. Then you have another firewall before you can go now to your external world. But still, even the cost of doing that, still when someone from the external world, an external user trying to get into your network, it will also first of all go through the firewall. The firewall will also have to check, filter, and then it have to come to the DMZ, before finding it will. And then talking about internal traffic from internal users or internal application must also pass through the internal firewall to access the DMZ. Do you understand? That's why we have both firewalls. So firewall will have to perform checks depending on the type of firewalls that an organization goes with. So it also perform checks and then it can then pass that into the DMZ. We have service isolation, web server, file transfer protocol servers, and other external facing server are placed in the DMZ to interact with external client while being shielded from the internal network. Because you don't want to carry stuff like that and put in your internal network. Man, you gotta be careful. Just like having sensitive document, some of us we are immigrant, your neutralization document, your passport and all those things. So just something that you just keep it in an open area that anyone can get hold on, right? You want to keep it, right? So same principle applies here. These services may interact with the internal network, right? For example, fetching data from the database server we're going to discuss and through carefully controlled access via the internal firewall, right? So even if somebody queries something, you have to go through the web server from the application server before fetching to the server to the database. Still, you have to go through that process again. That's what I talk about control and provide, a better security. But what are some of the use cases for DMZ? As I said, we're going to discuss in depth. We have web server, hosting public service website that need to be accessed to external user, but without directly exposing the internal network. You see? Yes, you can go there, you can check stuff, but not necessarily exposing your internal network. The next one has to do with email servers, that securing email communication by placing mail server in the DMZ, which are responsible for, because you interact with the external world, right? Interact with external clients and filtering inbound email traffic before even sending into the internal network. And that's why that's why I say it's set as a buffer zone, right? It goes there, do whatever you want to do with the network and all the other defense in depth mechanism that will put in place, make sure that packets are better filtered out before you can send in and out of your network. So we also have FTP servers, which allow secure file transfer between external users and internal systems while protecting internal data. And then we have DNS servers. It also provides DNS resolution services to external clients while preventing direct access to internal DNS servers, right? But let's look at a simple example of the DMZ architecture example. For example, we have two firewalls set up, right? In a case where we have two firewalls, I think I already discussed that already. First, the external firewall will then filter all traffic coming from the internet, right? Incoming traffic from the internet and forward legitimate requests to the DMZ. The DMZ hosts services. For example, you have the web servers, you have the email server and others, then restrict direct access to the internal network, right? So you have that, people, external clients or user could not just have direct access to your network. That increases the security risks that your organization or potential risks that your organization might be exposed to. And then for internal firewall, it controls access between the DMZ and the internal network, right? Allowing only authorized traffic now to pass through. The first filter, it goes through that filter, the external firewall, comes through the DMZ before even going through the internal firewall before finding a way to your internal network, okay? But what happens when we have a single firewall setup, also known as a triple home firewall? So in a situation where there's a single firewall is being used, they say this one create three zones. First, internal DMZ and external DMZ, right? So the firewall create this zone by implementing access control list. Now you guys understand what we meant by access control list from managing traffic management, right? Or give me a list of all the different access rules that you've got for, within your organization. And this gives us a good overview of all the thing we have been discussing. If you look at external, you have your firewall and then the wall, right? Anybody want to try to access DMZ, will have internal, and then of course, this is a firewall I said before and after. So that explains it very well, right? So that brought us to the end of DMZ. So we're also going to talk about web server. Remember, we made mention of web server. Why do you want to have your web server, in your DMZ? Why don't you want to have it, your internal network and the other servers that we've mentioned? So stay tuned as I will see you in the next video.